everybody, and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us here. Hope you're all well and enjoying this great summer ahead. We have got a terrific round today with a stellar artist. I'm so anxious to explore his work. So let's get started. Well, as we make our way in the world, there are many different courses and directions and options ahead, and a lot of places and signs there to tell us where to go and how to get there. And these directions are generally offered to help us, to get us to where we're headed. Directions usually are a line of thought or action, guidance for making choices or decisions. The directions we take in this world as artists often might seem counter to one another, sending us in opposite directions, or not, sometimes maybe not necessarily towards our primary destination. That could be something that's counter or opposite or contrary to what we feel our course of direction might be. But what if we find a course of direction that might be similar? Something slightly different, but still working, leading us in the same general direction. Tracks, two different tracks that can lead us to a similar destination. We find that that would take us in a parallel course, anything comparable in direction, course, or nature to something. And if we think of parallel lines, they're actually quite a prevalent part of our life, if you really look for them. We see parallel lines that get us through in a lot of different ways that we can apply creatively as artists. We even find parallel courses and lines that work to help us to express and expand our creativity. We can do this through similar courses or directions. And today, our primary source is a master artist who applies his art and techniques to very similar paths, expressing himself in many parallel courses. Bob Scott has established an expansive career within animation, working on as an animator, storyboard artist, director, and more, working on many legendary films at Pixar, as well as a number of terrific shorts. And he focuses talents in the artistry of comic illustration as well, most notably with this highly successful series, Molly and the Bear. So please join me in welcoming this remarkable artist with us today. So delighted to have him with us as a primary source, Bob Scott. Bob, welcome.
Hello. Wow, what an introduction. That was Thank you. That was very nice.
Primary sources treatment there.
Yeah, I feel like I'm still learning and growing. So
well, that's the best part of creativity and the arts, is that we never stop growing, right? There's always something new to discover and something new to explore.
Yes,
and I was
definitely.
so excited when we sat down to sort of discuss what we were going to discuss, and this idea of parallel tracks and the worlds that you move within. You've carved such a remarkable career in your main work as a storyboard artist and director and storyteller through Pixar and many of the other great projects you've been involved with, but then found your voice as well in the world of comics and comic illustration. So as an overall general artist, what sort of sparked you on these two different tracks?
As a kid, I just liked anything that was a cartoon. So whether it was a cartoon I saw on television or the Sunday comics, I just really responded to that. There was something about that I loved and gravitated towards. So to me, they were both kind of the same thing in a sense. I would see comic strips in the newspaper, that were also an animated TV show. A lot of people don't know this. Younger people probably don't know, but there were comic strip versions of Mickey Mouse that ran in the paper. There was Yogi Bear when I was a kid. When I was really, really young, I remember seeing Yogi Bear as a Sunday comic, and I also liked the cartoon. So they went together. And as I got older, I realized there were comic artists that I really was inspired by and loved Walt Kelly, who did a strip called Pogo, and Hank Ketchum, who did Dennis the Menace. They had started, I read, they had started as animators at Disney, and then they left Disney, created their own comics, and got syndicated. And so that was a path I thought was very intriguing to me. And very, I wanted to do that as a kid. I thought, wow, that would be great to learn how to draw from a studio like Disney where your characters feel alive. Because I would look at Pogo and Dennis the Menace and they jumped off the page, felt like animation drawings to me. And
Yeah.
so I learned that and then move into comic strips like they did. That was kind of the dream. Take what I learned there and bring that to the comic strip. So I had this two-part idea in my head. Um,
Well, so that was easily planted very early on, it sounds like.
yeah,
And, but and what's interesting, what I found fascinating is for some people, and working as an educator as well, oftentimes I really strive to tell my students to, you know, don't get focused. We're so focused on getting them focused to where are you going to hone your art and how are you going to, what are you going to portray in your portfolio? And um, but I love the idea of this range of diversity in what you do and how it. Let's talk a little bit about those differences between these two worlds and how they complement each other. Um, as an animator, you studied animation, but you still always had your foot in comics. What strengths do you pull when you're working in animation? I mean, are you shifting your brain from the comic illustrator to the, or is
right.
it all one, one force?
Yeah, I almost think of it as the same thing in some sense. When I moved into story, because I started out as a 2D animator, uh, and that was more about trying to learn how to make a character live and breathe and feel alive and act and do a performance. But once I moved into story, that really complemented what I was doing with comic strips all my life. I started learning more about having to come up with ideas quicker on the fly,
Mm.
and shots and compositions and things that I think really help strengthen when I come home at night and work on my strip. I felt like the stuff I was learning during the day and doing during the day applied to what I was doing. So they really kind of fed off each other. And then the strip would, inspire me with things that I would do at work. When I was at CalArts, I had a student film where the character's name was Myron, and I spun that off into a comic strip, and I would have do two of those a week, and they would be in the local newspaper, the Newhall Signal. I went down there with my comics, called them up, and said, "Hey, I'm a student at CalArts. Um, would you print a comic strip that I do on the side?" And they were really nice. They wanted to support a local artist, a local student, so they put it in twice a week. So I would take my strips down there twice a week. So even back then, I was animating. I was doing the strip on the side, just one or two a week. And
Well, and the difference between making movement and having that choreography, that the change and the surprise element that you can build within your movement and animation. I mean, how do you apply that to comics? You're looking at an individual panel or a series of panels. Is it just is it a different, pushing in a different way, pushing your characters in a
yeah, I
different
think
way,
it's with
pushing
with
the
animation. There's certain.
storytelling?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just pushing the storytelling in a different way, a different avenue. What?
Yeah, I think it's it's sort of editing a lot of stuff out. It's like when you're animating something, you're working with your key poses to sell that scene. What are the main two or three poses that your character is going to stay in that are kind of going to sell that acting bit or that storytelling point. And with strips, you're breaking that down. It's kind of like a few of your extremes that you were, key drawings for your scene would be broken down into a strip, but even economized even more because you have 3 to 4 panels. So what's the storytelling element that's going to sell this? If the first panel is, your character's coming into the room and you want to establish that the other character is reading a book because maybe it's a joke about something about the reading. Well, you're going to just simply, simplify that and just tell that one story. It's kind of like those little golden books. Just tell that one thing as simply as you can. So I think it helps to have both for me to have that background of animating it and getting really into the minutia and the details. But then how do I really simplify this? And boarding is that way too. It's like you look at the really old boards, especially Bill Pete would just very simply, what's the storytelling point for each thing? And comics are kind of the same thing, I think.
So
Yeah,
it's distilling down to the real essence of what are the primary beats, what is
yeah,
that, I see where that works between both paths.
yeah,
Um, what kinds of things, let's talk about that. When you're coming up with an idea,
right.
oftentimes, how are you sort of figuring that out? How are you getting from the concept of, well, what if I have my character do this? Talk a little bit about the discoveries that get made along the way.
Yeah, it can happen in many different ways. Sometimes it's just doodling in a sketchbook and finding a really funny drawing. That was something I learned. I worked for Jim Davis right out of Cal Arts. This will show you how much I jump back and forth. I graduate film school animation, and then I moved to Indiana with my girlfriend, and we got married. She was a student at Cal Arts as well, and we both ended up working for Jim Davis. And so I learned, seeing how Jim Davis wrote, that he wrote visually. He would draw a funny drawing of Garfield doing something, a crazy expression or whatever, and then kind of go backwards and go, okay, how can I get to this third panel with this funny idea?
Ah,
And that's one way I work, is just, if I'm stuck for something, just doodling, you know, drawing barren, funny expressions, funny poses, uh, that can spark an idea. Sometimes the words come first. Just an idea will pop into my head, something somebody has said. I've gotten jokes from, someone said something funny in a conversation, or my wife has said something funny, and I like, hey, that could be a fun idea. If I expand that, exaggerate that, that could actually work for a strip. Uh, a new way I've started to work, I don't do it all the time because it's actually a really difficult way to work, is to just start drawing and inking random panels and then taking them like a puzzle and kind of piecing them together and adding panels to connect those and coming up with an idea. And it's kind of a fun experiment. It takes longer, but it's sort of like the New Yorker card contest, where you would, they have the one panel and you're supposed to write send in the
yeah.
caption contest. And you can get some really funny stuff that way, I think. Just to kind of shake it up and try something different. Because I'd read there was a cartoonist who did a panel strip, and I can't remember what the name of the cartoonist is. I don't know if it's true, but that he would just draw panels. He had a writer write the captions. I thought that'd be interesting to try that with a strip, which is a lot
Yeah,
harder, I think. But
yeah, yeah.
but and then it'll spark a whole storyline, and then I'll write those. But it's kind of fun. So yeah, to answer your question, a lot of different ways pop up to do
I
it.
imagine that's the fun of it, though, is the
Yeah,
different paths that takes you on, or the discoveries that you're making along the way.
yeah,
Anything that, you also mentioned about where you get your inspiration coming from, comments or things. That was it Bill Keane. Glenn always talked about his dad instructing them every time they came to the dinner table. They had to, what did you do funny today?
right, right.
What was funny that
Yeah,
happened in your world, eliciting ideas from his kids.
yeah,
So I imagine it's also like anything creative, staying open to the world around you, because that's a large part of where the humor comes from, right? The reflection
absolutely.
of who we
Yeah,
are.
I mean, Bear is very easy for me to write because as a kid, I was a very fearful child. I was afraid of a lot of stuff and insecure and nervous and scared. Had anxiety and everything. And I just channeled that into Bear. It's easy for me to take that and exaggerate that. And then also the juxtaposition of him being so big, and he shouldn't be afraid of anything. He's strong. And Molly came from my daughter when she was 11. She's just a sweet, personality, a sweet kid, kind of, our son was kind of the fearful one, and she kind of like held his hand and helped him get through things, and sort of that sort of idea, I think, sparked the idea of these two characters. So yeah, definitely things that happen in life, things that people say, personalities that you meet. Um, there's a character in my strip. He's an uncle, and he's just kind of based on all the people. He's a part of me, part of everybody who are just into everything and want to try everything and get excited about everything, but don't always know what they're doing. And so he's just always excited about, I'm going to make an animated movie, but he doesn't even know how to animate. He's never even done it before. I'm going to make a spacesuit and go to the moon, and that sort of thing. So that's just kind of an amalgamation of people I've met, or like I said, a big exaggeration of that type of person.
But I think those archetypes that you have within your strip are great fun, that we can all, it's a an in point for a lot of different people. I think that's a
Yeah,
great part of the appeal of it.
yeah.
And I think too, let me ask you this. I mean, what sort of discoveries have you made about these characters and the world that you've created in the comic? I mean, that's got to be, it's so rich, it's got to be coming back at you a little bit, right?
So what do you mean exactly? Like,
Well, what discoveries have you made about, well, is, if you get an idea, would it actually work for this character? I mean, are the characters kind of guiding you in a way in terms of how you formed this world?
yeah, having lived with him for this long, they do kind of present, like I can think of Bear in any situation and kind of know how he's going to react, because I know him so well. I know he's going to be afraid of everything, and it goes deeper than just being afraid. I think in the very beginning of the strip, he was the very early 20 or so, or whatever. He was just scared a lot. And then there's this other side to him came out when I did a strip with him and the dad, and he was kind of teasing the dad and annoying the dad. And it was a sort of in an innocent way, or where you didn't know, does he know that he's teasing him? Does he know that he's getting his goat, or is he just so innocent? And then I started playing with that, and he started becoming a little more three-dimensional and not just scared all the time. He had like this other side, playful side. And so, yeah, I think drawing them all the time and writing for them, you do discover new things. And also, you get bored with the same thing and you want to play with it and see where you can take it next. And honestly, I wish I could do the strip more because I don't do it full time. I always feel like the strip is behind where I'm at in some ways. Like if I were doing it every day, you know, 7 days a week, who knows where the strip would be right now? I would have taken, who knows, I would have taken it to other avenues that I haven't even thought of, because you just so much material they have to come up with.
Well, that's the next question I have for you is, how do you keep it fresh? How do you, certainly the world gives inspiration to political cartoonists and
Yeah.
to social commentary cartoonists with world events and things, but with this world, how do you keep it fresh for you?
I think just taking the characters to new places. For a long time, they were only in the house. And then I did a series of strips. It was the longest storyline I did several years ago, where they went on an airplane, Bear and Molly, to visit Molly's grandmother. And so it was just Bear and Molly, and all, just putting them in a new environment created all these new opportunities that I hadn't thought of. And then in the last year or so, I've actually had Bear go to school with Molly, and I've introduced some new friends and characters. There's a girl named Harper that's Molly's best friend, and that's opened up a whole another aspect to Bear. How does he react when he goes to school? How is it when he's, and I like to treat him the way Bloom County treated Opus. Nobody really questions that there's a bear in the school. It's just he can talk, he's there. There's really not a lot of pushback or wait, there's a bear, what is he doing here? It's just kind of accepted that he lives in this world.
Well, that's the magic of the forum, I think, of comics is,
Yeah,
we can shift our perceptions and yeah, there's a bear right next to a very little girl. Sure.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I
We've
love that how Opus and Bloom County created their own world. There were animals
yeah.
in there, there were humans, And it was like this alternate reality that I just thought was great. And I guess Burt Breath had said that when he first introduced Opus and Opus talked, the syndicate gave him a hard time, and people were like, "Wait a minute, how does he talk? He's a penguin." He said, "Well, it's a cartoon." And there was, for some reason, there was this idea with comic strips that if animals were with humans, they communicated with thought balloons, or you only read their thoughts, like Snoopy and Garfield. But in animation, you have Yogi Bear talking to the ranger. No one questions it. Bugs Bunny talks to um, humans, Elmer Fudd, and nobody questions it. So that was kind of a new concept, weirdly. I never found it strange, but for some reason it was new to comics. And now I think you see it, and it's not even something people really think about. Although in the very beginning, people would ask when they'd read a couple strips, so is he a real bear? And I said, oh yeah, it's not like Calvin and Hobbes. He's a real bear. So they were used to that as well. It's like, oh, if the animal talks, he must be an imaginary character that no, does anyone else see him? Or so I try to make sure that people know, and they know now if they read it, that the dad sees him, everybody sees him, they all talk to each other, and there's no question that he is in that world. So you do learn things like that from doing it. And then also readers will point out, will say something and they'll spark an idea. I'll get comments and I'll think, oh, that's a funny, never thought of that. Maybe I'll push that. For instance, there was a kid that I introduced who people thought looked like a human version of Bear. They said, oh, he looks like he could be the human version of Bear. And I thought, well, that'd be funny. What if Bear wakes up in the morning, he's in a dream, and so I did a strip where he comes downstairs, he's a bear, he's a human, and the family are bears. It was only like 2 or 3 strips, and he woke up or whatever. But so even readers will say something that might spark a thought, an idea. Yeah.
Well, again, it's all this great world building and the possibilities, the directions, the very different directions you can go in. I think that's probably got to feed you creatively in some fun ways, but
Oh, definitely. I think everything you watch, everybody you meet, everyone you talk to, everything you read sparks ideas. I think the more you read, that just helps you have more to pull from. The more you learn about the world, you just have more inspiration and lots of things, not just reading about cartooning or
let's talk about observations and
yeah.
how, I mean, are you, what kinds of things when you're in the world? Is it, sitting and people watching and looking at the different gaits of individuals? Is it gestures? Is it the form of people? Talk a little bit about what might spark you on any given day.
Yeah, sometimes what sparks me too, not just from real life, we've talked about that a little bit, will actually be seeing an artist that really inspires me, like maybe looking through an old comic strip book and Dennis the Menace or something, and maybe they have a strip where I haven't done this yet, I haven't done them going to a circus, but just as an example, maybe there's one, oh, Dennis went to the circus. So suddenly I'm thinking, oh, circus, maybe I can take Bear to the circus. And I'm not doing anything that's like what he just did, but it'll just spark another thing or something you do if you go on a trip. You go to New York or Germany or somewhere, that can spark a whole, oh, what if I took the characters to New York? Or what if Bear and Molly were on the subway? So I feel like it's endless, that there really is so many possibilities if you just open up to where characters can go. And I'd love to do so much more, but like I said, I'm not able to do the strip every day. So I have books full of ideas and things I want to eventually draw up that I'm hoping to get to.
Well, and of that volume of ideas, would they all be focused into Molly and the Bear, or are there other tracks or lines that you'd want to move along onto within your storytelling?
Yeah, right now I've really been focusing on this strip for years. In fact, there's a new book coming out of a compilation book of strips. But that same publisher, Hermes Press, is also going to publish a graphic novel that I'm working on with
Oh,
the
wow.
characters. So it's taking those characters in a new space and really expanding and opening up the world. So it's still the same characters, but I'm trying to do more with them because a lot of kids don't read. Well, most kids don't even read the comics and newspapers. If they do, it's on the web. And what really kids read now are graphic novels. And so my wife and I had worked on a bunch of Peanuts graphic novels. She's done tons of them. She's written tons of them and drawn them for Boom. And she suggested, a graphic novel is, I think, the way to go to get more people to see and read the strip and the characters. So we collaborated, we wrote together a graphic novel together that it's kind of the origin story of Molly and Bear, and really expanded that, where he goes to school and there's friends, and it's a whole story, like 220, 25 pages that I'm halfway through drawing now. And we love collaborating together. I mean, she's a great artist, a great writer. And what she's brought to the graphic novel is the perspective of being she was a little girl, a little kid. She's a woman. She knows, things can make Molly more three-dimensional, things that I haven't thought of. So I feel like it's made the characters stronger. Yeah.
What are some suggestions for others, any of our participants here who are considering going into comics or moving into animation? But let's focus on comics for a minute. Maybe their artistry is in a different field, but often thought, hey, I've had these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about, you've obviously tapped into a great world and characters that are rich with possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about what to keep an eye out for, or what makes for a really rich concept or story idea that you can live in and explore and create in for so many years.
Right. I've tried so many different strips, and this was the one that really finally clicked for me. I would suggest just draw whatever inspires you at that moment, to not overthink it, because sometimes you can have kind of stage fright and overthink everything, and it can stop you. Now, if overthinking helps you move forward, and you're planning something out methodically, and that's the way your brain works, and you're still getting somewhere, then that's fantastic. For me, I need to just start on something, and an idea pops into my head, to do a comic strip, and I'll just dive in, and I'll figure it out as I kind of go along. So I would say, when you're first starting, you want to do a strip, to just doodle, try some strips, try some different things. Don't necessarily get married to one concept yet. Eventually one will click with you, and you'll go, hey, this is the one. This is, whether it's based on your life or somebody that or even if it's based on another comic strip. Like Bloom County started as kind of a ripoff of Doonesbury. I mean, he even said he only read Doonesbury. That was the strip he knew. And if you look at the early strips, it really was Doonesbury. It was very similar. And then he slowly turned it into his own thing. It became original when he brought the penguin in, and he brought other animals in, and he just created this silly world. So even that, you can start out copying something that kind of inspires you, and you move it to your own thing. So I think there's so many different ways to do it, but to not get hung up on. I've seen some artists where I've talked to for years, like, I'm going to do a comic strip someday. And then you see them again 5 years later. I still want to do a comic strip. Are you still doing yours? And I say, just do it. Don't wait. And if you don't like it, you get into it and you realize that this isn't what I like. Maybe it'll lead to something else. Maybe you'll say, a comic strip isn't for me, but I'm really enjoying drawing this character I came up with. I'm going to do a series of prints, or, maybe this is a children's book now. Like, don't be afraid to change what your original idea was, and experiment with it. And, eventually you'll hit on something, I think, that you just feel like, oh, this is the one I'm comfortable with. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, I think like many things, there's a lot of discovery involved with an idea.
Yeah,
Getting
yeah,
the idea is one thing, but then once you have that idea, it's, where is that idea going to take you? And
yeah.
that's I think a large part of who we are as creative beings. It's our responsibility to carry that idea and help forge the path, find that, where is it best suited? Where's the best course or best track for that?
And being yourself. I know it's a cliche, or we've heard it so much. It's like draw or write what you know, but it is so so true. When I was in high school, the comic strips I read, I remember reading there was a strip called Eek and Meek. Nobody would even remember this, by Howie Schneider. It was in our local paper, not that popular, not that big of a name or whatever strip. But the strip was a lot of strips of the characters were at bars drinking. And here I'm a little kid reading this,
Yeah.
and I love the drawings. But some of the first strips I did when I was in like high school was a character going to a bar and drinking. He's standing at the
Mm.
bar, and I draw the same bar, and the bartender, the cartoon thing. And
Where
I
did you draw
remember,
Molly and
yeah,
the
I went to visit I got to meet our local cartoonist in the Detroit News. He was the editorial cartoonist, and he did a strip called Right Angles, and he also did one called, he's passed away since, but called Kit and Carlisle. And I got to meet him. I showed him my work and everything. He told me that I had potential, but he said, "You need to write what you know." Here I'm a 16-year-old kid. I've never had a drink. I've never been to a bar. My parents don't drink. He saw right away, like, this, you're just copying,
Yeah.
you know, what you see in the paper. And I didn't quite understand what he meant at the time. Something, well, this is what I know. I read this in a comic strip. I know this. I didn't know the real aspect of it, but
Sometimes there's
then
a lot of not knowing what we don't know.
exactly, yeah, yeah, and that's when Bear With Me really hit. Was when that was something I knew about anxiety and fear and
Yeah, yeah.
having
That's a
kids.
discovery process too. Is there
Yeah,
any story ideas that or notions that you come across that just will not work for Molly and the Bear, and that you might develop something entirely different, or do you set that aside and go one day?
yeah. I mean, I have a few projects here and there. I have another comic strip that I did years ago that I actually kind of like, that I've played around with developing into an animated show. I'd love to do Molly and the Bear as an animated show. That's, I pitched that around a few places, nothing yet, and that's such a hard thing to do. But that would be just the best, to like marry
Yeah,
the two.
then bring your tracks together on the same course. You never know.
Exactly, because I do like collaborating. It was really fun doing the graphic novel. I'm still working on, but the writing is done with my wife, because it's just fun to collaborate.
Mhm.
And I often thought that some cartoonists, who've gone so far in their careers and then they end up retiring early, or they start running out of ideas, I thought, well, they could maybe benefited from collaborating. Maybe they would have enjoyed that. And some cartoonists do that, and others, no, they want it to be their own thing, which is fine. But I like, you know talking with people in story and coming up with ideas, and then going off on your own, just let your mind wander. But I forget what we were even talking about. Speaking of mind wander, why I went to this path. But
Well, different story ideas that are suited for different forums and topics or themes that you may not work with what you've shaped, but if there's some other
yeah, yeah, I would say the other
part.
comic strip that I have, it's about two space aliens. That wouldn't work to me with Molly and the Bear. I had a friend say, "Why don't you have them in the strip?" And Bear could see aliens, and that, I thought, it wasn't the right fit for that world for me. Like, separately, it works as its own thing, but the two, to me. So that's one example, and I'm sure there's other things I can't think of off the top of my head that I thought of. It's like, oh, that wouldn't fit the strip. It took me a long time to open up to the idea of making the strip feel a little more modern. It's funny, I didn't try to make it feel old fashioned. Um, but a lot of readers were saying, like, does this take place in the 50s or 60s? And I realized, yeah, I'm drawing a lot of old things. The TV's old, they're not on cell phones. They use a landline. And so I started for leaning into that for a while and just keeping it kind of feeling old. And then I realized that bringing in modern technology occasionally, it's something people can relate to, and B, it's a whole new avenue of humor that I didn't have before. So now Molly texts and has a cell phone, and there's references to computers and stuff. And but so it's kind of it's definitely the modern world. but the dad still drives an old 57 Chevy, that's his car, classic car, and he makes reference to that sort of thing. And I think also because I draw the strip on paper with bristle board with pencil and ink, it has a look to it that maybe looks a little different sometimes that people respond to, that makes it seem a little
We've
bit
got
older maybe.
we've got a few examples of your work, so let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit about your process, and then we're also getting some great questions coming
Oh,
through. So
good.
get
Okay.
to those.
I
But
hope I'm not boring anybody.
no, no, this is great, and that's the beauty of it is we get to explore you and your work and your world. So let's take a look. You've got. I'll let you decide what you want to start with.
Yeah,
Uh,
let's start with the process. Yeah, so this is an example of a gag that came out of a drawing. I was just doodling, doing lots of doodles, and I just had him looking really panicked, like make the anxiety stop, make it stop. And so then that gave me an idea for a whole gag here. Molly comes in the room. And this is I used to thumbnail out everything, but now I just go right to board and draw it. But so I just wrote out the dialogue. And Molly says, if you had a better concept of time, you might not go through such severe separation anxiety when I'm away. I'm going to leave the room and count to 10, then come back. Try to stay calm. Bear says, okay. You hear Molly in the distance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's like, make it stop. So that's the gag, but it's really a visual gag. So when I go to draw it, you can see the next panel or the next JPEG. I do a rough um, strip. I border it all up. I draw my dialogue in or write my dialogue in first, so I know how much space that I have. And sometimes this is where I'll start editing and getting rid of some of the words if there's too much dialogue. I always try to not say anything that can be seen. So if a character comes in the room and is holding and eating a bowl of cereal, I don't say, "Hey, I'm eating cereal," or have the character go, "What cereal are you eating?" Or so, we know he's eating it. So, anyways, this one I kept very simple. It's all about him panicking. I don't have very much of a background. I just have a window and a picture, which just kind of shows you where they're at. Then after that, we don't really need to see anything else. So I take it from that, this is the rough layout. And you also notice in the last panel, the bear is too big. He's actually bleeding out of the panel. This is where Photoshop will come in handy later, where I can resize him. I could have erased him and drawn him smaller, but I like the way he looked. In fact, I think I traced right over the rough from the sketchbook.
wow. Well,
But
it adds to the urgency of his anxiety too by that just sort of thrust in a little bit to him.
exactly, yeah. So the next one, this is where I get much tighter with the drawing. So now I've really tightened it to where I can ink from this now. Sometimes I don't go quite this tight. It just depends. Um, I know some cartoonists, which really amazed me. Charles Schultz worked super loose, and he did a lot of the drawing with the inking. Um, and I tend to get tighter sometimes. So this is the tied down version. I've made a little note, shrink in the computer. I don't know why. I'm not going to forget that, but I just did anyway. And then I take a pen and I hand letter it. I like to hand letter. I don't use a font. Um, yeah, so then from that one, I'm ready to ink. I've got everything drawn up. So we can go to the next one. And here's the first inking without all the blacks in it. So everything's inked in now. And then we go to the next one. And now I've added the blacks and I've added the borders. I use a ruler for that. And as you can see, the panels are not the correct sizes. And then the next one is going to be the final one. You see I've adjusted everything. The panels are the correct size and everything. And what I did with this is I took the last one you just saw and I scanned that into Photoshop. And I'm able to get rid of the red pencil. Usually I work in blue, sometimes red, but you can go into Photoshop and you can get rid of that color. And then you have to adjust the levels to give it like a nice black ink. And that's the final strip. And that's what I'll put up I'll put a little copyright on it and then the name of the strip, and that's what I'll put up on Go Comics, which is the syndicate, the website that runs the strip. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And what I like doing about a strip is it really is something that within 2 or 3 hours I can be done with, and I can, say I finished something. Whereas anything else can be a comic book, or I'm going to make a movie on the side or animate a scene. It's going to take me a lot longer. So I like the immediacy of it. If an idea pops into my head and I really like it, I can draw it that day and it's done. And I can put it up the next day.
Great form of instant gratification.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
And let's talk a little bit about your inking too. That's a whole different process, an entirely different artistic animal in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a video if you want to show that while I'm
Yeah,
talking.
let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I ink with a brush. There are still some cartoonists that work this way. A lot of them work digitally now. Either use a brush or they use a pen. But this is in real time. I know a lot of people show videos showing it very fast, but I kind of wanted to show it in its normal time just so you can see, how I really ink. So this is a Winsor Newton #2 brush,
Mm.
and I use Black India ink. And off to the right, it's out of camera, is the I'll dip eventually to get more ink. But it's surprising how much ink you have on the brush for a while. And yeah, I'll just ink over it. It took me a long time to sort of learn how to ink with a brush, but I do it now, and it's actually very relaxing for me. I enjoy the process. It's kind of almost the least stressful part of the whole process, in a weird way, is the inking for me, because I know everything's done and working, and I try not to get too fussy with it. I know that if I can, something doesn't work, I can white it out. But I tend to not use a lot of whiteout. I'm able to just ink straight through.
It's very zen-like watching you ink. I love it.
Yeah, it's then like doing it. It's
Yeah. Well,
meditative.
inking is one of the great levels of artistry that we just don't explore enough. Just in my own research and talking and working with
Yeah,
the women who inked many of those hundreds of thousands of cells in animation, just
yeah,
masters. It takes decades to really learn the mastery of this, and the brush inking as well is its own unique approach. Just marvelous.
yeah. I love, and believe it or not, that's okay. I finally dipped into some ink. You can see. My
Let's get
wife's filming
started.
this. I should have showed the ink, but no, it is surprising how much ink, because I know people saw this video once. I put it on Facebook, and they said, "Is that a brush that already has ink on it, like an ink brush?" And because it's
Reloaded, yeah.
long, but uh, yeah, I think
Uh,
I mean, people do beautiful stuff on the computer, and I have no problem with how anybody works. Whatever, I think every process and every way of working is fine and great, and everything. This is just what I enjoy doing. I never learned how to really ink on the computer. I've learned how to do storyboards on the computer, rough drawings, but uh, this is so different than what I do during the day. So it's a nice break.
yeah.
But
Some,
yeah, it's true. Everybody used to ink their comic strips, and a lot of art was used brushwork. You don't really see that so much. Yeah.
yeah, some studios did, some artists in ink and paint did do brushwork, but most
Oh,
of the
did
main
they?
studios were working off a crow quill, which is, working with the pens and
Yeah.
the ink nibs. But again, this is just fascinating to see.
Oh,
Um,
good. I'm glad.
and I think too, probably you're not, what I'm also thinking about as I'm watching this is you're not as pressured deadline wise or time wise. Maybe you are, but this is
You
moving very
know,
quickly.
because I don't do the strip 7 days a week, and Go Comics lets me post whenever I want to. I post 7 days a week now because I have such a backlog. I run a lot of reruns, and I do like maybe 2 new ones a week. So you can read it 7 days a week. But because I don't have that steady deadline, um, I don't have to rush. Yeah, I can, I mean, the deadline is my own, where I feel like, oh, I haven't put something up in a while. There's too many reruns. I need to get something new up for people. And also I have this new idea that I'm excited to share with people, see if they like it, or, you know, what comments I'll get. But yeah, you're right. There's no pressure to, you know, a hard, fast deadline. It's
Yeah,
only
a production team waiting for your.
exactly. Now, if I were doing it every day, I don't know. Maybe if I did the strip 7 days a week, I think I would like doing it. But maybe it would be too much. I don't know.
This is also part of the process that a lot of comic artists will hand off to somebody. And I would think you'd be losing some of your line integrity, if, you know, or unless you really trusted that inker. And
Yeah, I really like inking, but yeah, comic books tend to always be compartmentalized. You know, it's kind of like animation, where you have the writer, then
specialists,
you have
yeah.
someone pencil it, and you have someone ink it, and you have a colorist. So it's a little more comic strips. Yeah, there's a lot of cartoonists that have assistants. I mean, Jim Davis has had assistants. He's had people who help him write and draw and ink, and you know, that's the way he likes to work.
Lloyd Norman got his start working on the Katie Keene comics, inking in line, doing line work on those.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got my start in comic strips professionally through Jim Davis.
Huh.
Right out of Cal Arts, I got hired to go work for him. So he had a comic strip at the time, another comic strip called U.S. Acres, and he was doing Garfield. He had an assistant drawing both Garfield and U.S. Acres. It was just way too much work. So my good friend from Cal Arts, Brett Koth, and I both got hired. We went out to Indiana. I lived there for a couple of years. My wife came out too, and we all worked there in a bullpen. And I penciled the strip. Brett penciled. My wife was inking it. She moved into licensing and started drawing Garfield, and then there was another person inking it. Jim had a few writers helping, and so I learned. That's how I learned, by collaborating and being an assistant. And I know that's kind of frowned upon. Some people, you know, don't like that when they find out that a cartoonist doesn't do everything themselves. But I don't know. It doesn't really bother me. I got my start that way, so I really am thankful that I was able to work on a professional strip, and it didn't bother me that my name wasn't on it or anything like that. And
Well, it really was sowing the seeds of what we get to reap today. We've got some terrific questions coming
oh,
in.
great.
Tina,
Okay.
I'm going to hand it off to you to jump in with a question or two here.
Sure, I'm having such a great time just sitting here listening. This is awesome.
Hi, Tina.
Hi, so we do have a question, do you make corrections in Photoshop if you made a mistake, or do you do it another way?
Yes, I do. Well, for instance, that one strip that we just looked at, I shrunk down bare to fit. And occasionally when I see it all put together, because I draw rather big, actually, I'll show you just for an example. This is how big the actual original strip is.
Awesome.
And sometimes I've done some in the past where they're a little bit smaller. But what happens when you draw that big, sometimes when you see it smaller, when I see it smaller, I'll notice that, oh, you know what? I drew Bear's head just a little too small. I didn't notice that when it was big. So I'll just take the lasso tool and shrink it down, or make it bigger, whatever, you know, size adjustment I want. Generally, the strip is pretty accurate to the original. But occasionally I'll do if there's any whiteout that I need, if I messed up a line, I'll do that because I want the original to look like a finished piece of art. Yeah, I can change things, or sometimes the lettering, I don't have an example here. Sometimes the lettering I'll draw too far, you know, I'll shrink it down in the computer, you know. So that's the nice advantage of Photoshop, is being able to make those little corrections. Now, the old artist had to make sure everything was exactly the correct way it was going to be, but we have that luxury, or I have that luxury, to be able to fix stuff. Yeah.
Bob, do you have a collection of resources or reference to draw from, like Pinterest or a folder in your downloads? If so, what kind of stuff do you collect? as reference?
Oh, well, anytime I find any cartoonist that I like, I tend to look at a lot of old cartoons. I usually just throw it in on my iPad. I have a folder of something like, oh, I love that drawing. Something inspires me about that, or what a great ink line, or there's a great Hank Ketchum strip I never saw. I'll put that in there. It's generally cartoon stuff. Um, just artists that I really admire, that I like, and I'm constantly discovering old comic strips that I've never seen before because of the web. You'll find something that was, a strip that lasted for like a year in the 50s or something, and it's got this beautiful artwork, and it's just something uh, that inspires me. So I tend to look at a lot of the older stuff, and then Instagram, I look at newer stuff on there, friends stuff, or people that I just like their artwork, and probably like most people, just save something that you like or inspires you. Yeah.
There's another question from Ruben. Can you talk about how different the writing process is for you for graphic novels to other kinds of strips? He's saying that he has story ideas. It's kind of grandiose, but do
Uh-huh.
you have advice or a good way to get used to doing that?
Well, for me, I was lucky. I have a wife who's super talented and written graphic novels and draws graphic novels. So we collaborated on the writing, because for me, writing a long form story wasn't something I like writing the strip. I like smaller chunks. But writing a full story, uh, I'd say collaborate. If, that's one way to do it. If you want to do it yourself, I think it's just going to be methodically going through it, and thinking about your basic story and how to break that down into chapters, and that sort of thing. But if it isn't your strong suit or something you don't enjoy doing, I say collaborate. I think that's a great way to go as well. I enjoy the drawing more than I enjoy writing a really long graphic novel. Yeah.
I
Uh,
think that's also the importance of having a good community around you of creatives that
yeah.
can recognize your, where you may not be as strong as another colleague or friend or someone seek them out and
Yeah.
build in for. And again, those worlds are, you travel so beautifully between those worlds of your animated work and your comic work, but um, also the other artists that you're working with in this area. I think who doesn't love a like mind who can help shape and expand on what your idea is.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And because I can't do the strip every day, um, it's it's I can get more done that way. The graphic novel would have taken so much longer if I just wrote it myself. You
Yeah.
know, so I'm able to get the idea out faster.
Someone says, "Hi, Bob. How'd you get your first job opportunity?"
I was at Cal Arts, and this would be 1984, I think it was. And Daryl Van Sitters, who was doing a film called Sport Goofy for Disney, was looking for freelance artists, um, to do animators, and he wanted to use people from Cal Arts. And he kind of went through, and we all showed our portfolios. We had meetings with him, showed our portfolios, and he ended up hiring a lot of us to do freelance animation on that. So that was just very lucky that somebody was combing Cal Arts and looking for fresh talent. Uh, so that was the first thing that first actual professional animation job, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, was that. It was great to get a chance to work on that, to work on a Disney short. Sport Goofy was the name of it. It was Goofy and Scrooge McDuck and the nephews, and so it was all that style of that world. The Carl Barks type of stuff. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
There's another question that's in the same tone as that. Have you ever had to move far away from home to work at a studio? If so, what was that like adjusting to
Mhm.
your new environment?
Everywhere I've worked is far from home. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, so yeah, coming to Cal Arts was far from home. I remember I got to CalArts right out of high school, and I turned 18 that summer. So for me, I was scared. It was it was not, easy at first, and then like everyone, you get used to college and everybody. And I was fortunate. I had a friend, Dan Juke, who also works in the industry, and I knew him back in Michigan, and he went to CalArts before I did, so I at least had a friend to go to, which was kind of nice. But even then, it was different being far away. But yeah, it's always an adjustment when you go, whether you go far away or you just go from one studio to the next. Getting used to the project, the film, the culture, and everything can be an adjustment. Of course, went all the way to Indiana to work for Jim Davis. That was a huge adjustment. Even though I was from the Midwest, it was very different than where I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit and Michigan. It was just different. It was much more rural. So I think, yeah, um, those are great opportunities, though. When you have those, they can be scary, but I think you can learn so much from them, not just from the job, but everywhere you go, you meet new people, and there's always new friends that you're going to make that if you had not gone there, you'd never know that person. So there's just so much opportunity when you get that type of thing.
Fresh inspiration as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Talk a little bit about any tips you have to keep your talents and your creativity flexible or fresh.
Not being afraid to work outside your comfort zone. If you have an opportunity to do something new and it scares you a little bit, that actually can be good, because it means you're out of your comfort zone, and it's something new that isn't going to be easy. Because everything you learn, at one point you were bad at it. One point, the only way you got good at something is because you practiced, you kept doing it, and you had people helping you or teaching you or whatever. And I think as we get older, it's harder sometimes to do that because you get very comfortable uh, in your space. And sometimes a challenge can be a good thing. I left traditional animation to go to Pixar to work as a storyboard artist. I'd never really done that much storyboarding. That was hard in the beginning. It was a whole new thing. I was out of my comfort zone, but I'm so glad that I learned it, because I learned so much from doing it that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And then moving into the computer, doing computer animation, that was a challenge. So those things really, I think, kept me going, keeping me inspired and kind of keeping me on my toes. Having said that, there is something nice about knowing what it is you do best and what you love to do. I mean, you don't want to just take a challenge because it's challenging necessarily. It might not be the thing for you. Maybe if what you like to do is really cartoony stuff, then find a challenge with that style that you love to do. A job that's going to challenge you, but it's what you love. You're not doing, because I've been on jobs where it was a challenge, but in the end is like, that's not a style I really want to continue. I learned a lot. It was good for me, but I know my zone and what I like. So yeah, and it's also a long journey. There's really no mistakes. Uh, you try something, you don't like it, you try something else. Um, you know.
I think there's an important discovery there when you
Yeah,
realize this isn't what I'm into or where my talents are. Or and it's
exactly.
equally important. I think a lot of, especially young artists and students, are afraid of trying something different because it may not turn out that way. But that's an equally important discovery to make, I think.
Yeah, and I think whatever, like if you're just starting out, and let's say you really want to be a 2D animator, you want to be a computer animator, but the one job you can get right now is character design, and maybe you hate character design, do it. And I'm sure most people probably would do it, because you're getting your foot in the door and you're learning, and you'll meet people that maybe do the thing you do want to do.
Mhm.
So I say, do whatever you can to get your foot in the door, because the more experience you get, people start to know your name, and you get better, and you're going to make connections, and you're going to start networking and knowing people. And also, helping your friends. I think at Cal Arts, all of us helped each other, and I got help from everybody. You know, friends were working at a studio, and they would recommend people from Cal Arts. And then once you got in there, you recommend somebody, and you're always trying to help somebody else, because the more people you help, you're also going to be helped. You know, yeah.
Oh, great advice.
Someone wanted to know, do you have advice about, you had talked about collaborating. Do you
Uh-huh.
have advice about how to collaborate with others on a project, like a comic? And are there some important things to watch out for?
Well, I would say collaborate with somebody that you already, I guess if it's your, and I think it doesn't have to be somebody you already know, but it helps if you know the person already and you're already on the same wavelength. You know, a friend of yours that maybe is in the industry and you both just click, and it's easy to work with them. Uh, that's that's always a good situation. But maybe there's somebody that you don't know that you can start small on something. You're not sure with this person, so maybe you'll just do, well, let's do an 8-page comic story. You don't have to say, oh, this is our collaboration forever, we're getting married and we're always going to work together like Lennon and McCartney. Well, even they broke up, but we're going to stay together forever. You know, maybe you work with this person and then you try somebody else, you know, and you just collaborate with lots of people, and then stick with the people that you fit with the most, or you feel like you both just click or whatever, I guess is what I would
And
say.
I would think too that each project is going, you know, you'd want a perhaps a different, bring in fresh approaches and
Yeah, yeah,
keep things moving, and
yeah.
not every talent is suited for certain projects.
Yeah, for instance, if I knew somebody that wrote great comic books that were action adventure comics or superhero or whatever, um, that person probably wouldn't be the right person to help collaborate on a graphic novel with my characters. But then again, maybe they would. Maybe they're pining to do that kind of thing, and they've got something in their portfolio that's like, oh my gosh, that's exactly,
Hmm.
we would fit great together. So
Well, part of the discovery process here.
We have a question from Sammy. What classes do you recommend for someone who didn't go to art or animation school, but wants to be a storyboard artist? What's your advice?
there's some really good online classes. The one person I know, Rad Seacrest is his name. I worked with him at PDI DreamWorks up in Northern California, and he does online classes. He's a terrific storyboard artist, and I think his classes are pretty affordable. They're not real long classes. You'd have to check his website. Rad Seacrest is his name. He's somebody off the top of my head that I know is really a really good teacher and has taught a lot of people how to storyboard. Um, Also, being around other artists, having an artist community, having other people that draw, like-minded individuals you can all share and learn from, can also help. And showing your work, not being afraid to show it and get constructive criticism. Um,
Well, jumping into many great events and festivals such as CTN, little
oh, definitely, yeah,
promotion here. I think that's one of the great things that is accomplished through CTN is that networking and exposure to other artists and seeing their work,
absolutely,
learning, attending many of the events and lectures and this type of forum too. We try to
yeah,
help feed that need a little bit. And I think,
absolutely.
you know, and the beauty of the internet, you can dial in and tap in at any given time and
Mhm.
get fed a little bit with some inspiration and a new approach, or look at the artwork and you can dial up at any time, day or night, and see your work and see new material that's out there. So it's a tremendous time, I think, for artists who may not have had specific training or the best training with where they are, but you do
Right.
have the internet and the great volume of resources available here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think there's never been a better time to find
Yeah,
like-minded people and find reference and artwork to look at, and people teaching tutorials. There's even, I mean, gosh,
and
there's even
forums and
storyboard
outlets for
tutorials.
your work. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that if you
There's
don't
so
have the
much
money
here.
for a class.
Yeah. But I think too, just having that forum and a place to put your work out there and to see and compare and learn from.
Yeah.
But to your point, I think it makes tremendous sense to be able to have that immediate go-to network of
Mhm.
trusted fellow artists that you can, hey, I'm a little blocked on this particular thing. What do you think? Or, what any fresh ideas or I need help with. I think that's
Yeah.
key. That's another great thing about what is accomplished through CTN is building that network. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's so many people, and if you live, I don't know where this person lives, but they live in the LA area.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
Going to any of the CTN classes that they have, like the life drawing class, even if you want to be a storyboard artist, just going there and learning life drawing from one of the teachers, you're going to learn so much, and you're going to meet other people that might already be doing storyboarding, and you can show them your work, and get an honest critique.
I think that's what I love about this side of storytelling in the worlds of animation and comics and illustration is that the artisans are so eager and happy and delighted to talk about their work.
That's true.
You
Yeah.
don't always find that in other industries, and that's what I love about landing in this amazing world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Great folks like you.
Speaking of landing in this wonderful industry, there's a couple of questions about
Mhm.
portfolios. Should story artists include story beats in their portfolio? And I'm going to combine it here. Somebody was asking also, should we add comic strips to our portfolio with thumbnails, character turnarounds? What is your best advice there?
Well, if you're applying for story, you want to make sure your portfolio is probably leaning mostly towards story, and you'll want maybe 3 or 4 sequences of scenes that you've boarded. They don't have to be really long, but um, just enough to show that you can cut, you can do acting, you can basic filmmaking. Uh, I'd say throw in comic strips. Honestly, I got one of the reasons I got into story at Pixar. I showed my portfolio and I didn't have any boards in it, hardly. Um, I had my comic strips. And I found out that was one of the things I also found out from PDI. One of the reasons I got hired, they liked my comic strips. So that actually helped me. And the nice thing about that is it's something that's uniquely yours, you know. Um, Especially because I've worked in the industry, so I always try to throw in something that no one else is going to have. It's going to be my own thing. But yeah, I would say absolutely put in some comic strips. I'd say lean mostly on the storyboarding, some comic strips, and then some character design stuff is fine too. But you want your portfolio to reflect the thing you're applying for the most.
Well, those comic strips within your portfolio sort of, I would think, are more of a standalone example of where your mind goes and what your artistic talents are rather
Yeah.
than, oh, I've got to explain the context of what I had to do within the parameters for this particular storyboard, you know?
Yeah,
It,
and I think it
it's,
also, I was just say it also helps them see that it was all your idea as well.
yeah,
Because when you work for a studio, you've been directed a certain way, and the comic strip is like, oh, that's completely me. That's nobody
your voice,
over
your
that or
art.
read through that or
Yeah, yeah. You don't have to explain that. Well, the art director on this project insisted that it had to be this way and we could only see it from a profile or, you know,
exactly.
those
Yeah,
kinds of things that have to be explained to justify why it was done. And yet, through a comic strip or your own individual artwork, it's your whole, you know, representation of your thought process, your ideas,
exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
the
Yeah,
full level of your creativity without any guidance from others.
yeah, yeah,
So it is important, you're saying then, to incorporate some elements that will address that, that will really showcase your voice and what makes you unique and what you bring
yeah.
to.
What is it you're bringing that no one else has? Because everybody's different. We're all, and I remember one time somebody saying, don't underestimate how the way you think being different than everyone else. You might think, oh, this idea I have is the dumbest thing. Everyone would think of this. No one this is so obvious, and you say it in a story meeting and everyone laughs and no one thought of that idea. And you don't realize that you have something that, because of your background, your personality, that nobody else has.
Yeah.
You can show that in your work, in your portfolio. That's a huge plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of those dumb ideas or what people may not think is worthwhile
Yeah.
turn into pretty remarkable things. I've got a list of those that I've done that the ink
Yeah.
and paint book people thought, no, there's nothing there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not a great idea.
No, exactly.
Anyway,
And
yeah.
surprise.
Yeah.
So you just hold on to those, tuck them in a file. Maybe it's giving it a little bit of time and let it foment a little bit and then pull it out with fresh eyes and oh, there is something there. There is a
Yes.
great idea, or that line, I should try applying that to this character now that I've developed. There's always something to that original idea and thought.
And when you haven't seen it in a while, it's like you're seeing something fresh that someone else did, and you finally see how that, oh, you know what, if I just do this, that gag works now. But you never would have seen it a year ago.
And, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We all have those files somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I have old song lyrics and things that I'll pull out and go, not bad, or oh boy,
that's
what was
great.
I thinking? But if I twist it a little bit or shift it around, not
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great.
The fun of what we do.
Right on topic. Someone asked, do you keep a sketchbook or journals for your ideas and your comic ideas? Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I do. I always have a small sketchbook that I'm writing ideas down in, whether it's visual sketches or whatever. Constantly I have tons of gags and ideas I want to get to at some point to draw. But yeah, I think keeping your brain thinking and going, and even if it's just half a thought, a sentence that you thought in your head that sounded funny and you don't have a full idea for it, I'll write that down. And then later on, I might reread that 6 months later and go, oh my gosh, I have an idea now. So yeah.
Do you keep a sketch pad at the bedside when in the middle of the night getting a great idea or something?
I do have one near my bed. And yeah, occasionally I do. Sometimes I'll fall asleep with an idea in my head and I wake up in the morning, I forgot the idea. But I think, well, if I don't remember, maybe it wasn't that good after all.
They're fleeting. It's very true.
Yeah.
We've got a musician and a comic storyboarder here. One question is, do you think storyboarding and songwriting share any similarities? That's an interesting question.
That is
Do you
really
think storyboarding and songwriting share any similarities?
I would, I assume they would, because a lot of the arts kind of have similar, I don't know how to answer that, but a lot of them have similar things. I mean, you're telling a story with a song,
Yeah.
and you're telling a story with storyboards, and you're probably with songwriting trying to break down the simple basic ideas and phrases into the simplest, most understandable form, which is what you're doing in story and in writing a screenplay or any sort of storytelling. So yeah, I would think there's definitely similarities there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you want to convey it clearly. If you've structured a song in a particular theme or a particular vein, or you've got you're working within panels for your comics, you've got to work within a pretty established framework, just as you do with the meter and the line structure that you do in songwriting and rhyme. But yeah, there always needs to be a point, and in good storytelling and in good songwriting, there is something you can grab onto, and that's familiar or yet surprising. There's always a need for a surprise, whether it's the hook of the chorus or the end of the song, or that final frame that gives you the punch of the joke, or
yeah, absolutely. I think that makes total sense. Yeah,
a lot of parallels. Again, another great parallel park. I think the arts have a lot of similarities all throughout that can be found, but sometimes when the world wants us to be very compartmentalized with what we do,
right,
And I think that's our biggest strength as artists is we can fit in anywhere and apply what we do anywhere.
right, right. Yeah.
And
Yeah, I know a lot of musicians like to collaborate with different artists with different styles of music because it's inspiring and they find similarities and common ground, but they also learn something new from each other's
yeah. I
way.
love the fact that
Right.
many artists are also musicians. Those
Yeah.
worlds blend quite a bit, which is
Yeah,
exciting.
that's true. Yeah.
And I think that's the fun is, and again, back to our topic today, that finding these places, these lines where they can interconnect and
Yeah.
move in a parallel consort is half the
Yeah.
fun of it.
Yeah. I think things do cross over. I know a lot of animators are also into puppets and the Muppets and,
Yeah.
maybe made puppets when they were kids or into it or appreciate it. And, it's all somehow related. It's entertainment, it's filmmaking, it's
Storytelling, it's
storytelling. Yeah.
reflecting who we are as humans. It's art.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
We get to play in some great sandboxes, that's for sure.
Someone mentioned that they're very grateful for the answers, Bob, and they said also timing and pacing. Yeah, it kind of crosses over everything. But
Yeah.
they wanted to ask you, are you currently working on any shows or features as a story artist? And if so, how has the industry pipeline changed for you recently since the pandemic?
So for the last year and a half or more, I've been working at Alcon. It's a studio that's done mostly live action, and they're doing animation now. And we're working on a Garfield movie. So I'm back in the same space with, a Jim Davis character. Mark Dindal's the director. He did Emperor's New Groove, um, Cats Don't Dance, Chicken Little. I worked with him on Cats Don't Dance many years ago. It's a film that hardly anybody knows about, but was a really fun, cartoony movie. And so yeah, I'm storyboarding on that. And yeah, it's changed with the pandemic where we're going to continue to work from home uh, throughout the rest of this film. So um, yeah, I'm one of there's just a few of us left in story, and we're moving forward with other aspects. And eventually I'll be doing some animation on it as well. So, but yeah, that's the big change. And then of course, the Cintiq has been the big change for me in my lifetime in storyboarding. We used to board on paper. When I was on Pixar, the first film I worked on, Monsters Incorporated, was all done on paper. The Incredibles was all boarded on paper. That was kind of the film where it started to change. The drawings were scanned into Photoshop and we painted them. We did grayscale in Photoshop, but we used a Wacom tablet looking at the screen. And then of course now it's all boarding pretty much as digital, on the Cintiq. So that's changed.
Talk about those pluses and minuses. What do you miss about paper versus
Yeah,
technology, or vice versa?
I love storyboarding on the Cintiq. I just really took to it like a duck to water. I just feel like for me, storyboarding actually got easier for me on the Cintiq um, because I was able to like resize things and really mess around with composition and pull in reference, and it just made it easier for me. And also, I feel like I can see the story better when I'm pitching through it on a screen because that's how the movie's going to look to me. So I just feel like I got better and it got easier for me. I know there's a lot of people that didn't like the change and still miss paper. Now for comic strips, I love paper. So I guess it just depends on what I'm doing, but I absolutely love boarding on the Cintiq. Um, it has freed me up a lot and made I think made me a better board artist. Yeah, personally.
A great tool. I think too many focus on it as the end all be all, but it's simply another tool in your
Yeah,
palette of options, and
absolutely. Yeah,
applying it properly makes all the difference.
yeah, yeah.
Bob, who is your main comic artist influences? Was what
Oh,
someone asked. I'm sure the list is long, but
oh, you know what? Actually, could we show two images I have up there? So, a lot of people don't remember the comic strip Pogo, probably. I mean, it was even even when I was a kid, it was pretty much gone, but I got used to the books. So Pogo this was Walt Kelly, who drew for Disney. He was an animator. He went into comic books, and then he went into political cartoons, and then he went into doing his own comic strip. And so I've done a few of these now and again in my tribute strips, where I take a influence and I try to, the best of my abilities, draw that person's style. So this is one of them. Walt Kelly, I loved his drawings, and anybody who hasn't seen his work should definitely check it out, because mine doesn't do him justice at all. But I just thought I'd show this, so that I like to try to do this once in a while, put something in that was an influence to me. And then the next one, Bloom County, was another big influence on me. I read that in college, and this one I drew a few years back, and recently, 2018, recently I put this one on Instagram, and Burke Breathitt, who still actually does Bloom County digitally now, he liked it and he shared it on one of his stories. So that made my day. I was like, I was so happy that he liked it and was honored. He does a lot of parodies and things with other strips, so I knew he'd be okay with me drawing his characters, and he was. So in 1982 was when I graduated high school, and that was kind of when Bloom County was just becoming really big. So it was kind of a little nod to that in the year that I read it the most, or was really into it. So but those would be two of my biggest. And then Hank Ketchum, and of course Jim Davis. I loved Garfield. When it first came out, I thought it was hilarious. I loved the writing and the drawing style, and so those are the ones off the top of my head that I can think of. And Doonesbury, that was another one. I love Doonesbury's writing. Yeah.
Well, and I love where your mind goes within that forum of those, minimal grids, but yet you still find a way to push the boundary.
Oh, thank you.
Play with time and space and character and humor and combine all those great elements.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, we're the lucky ones. Thank you. And I want to make sure Tina, you mentioned we've got.
Yeah, we do. We have a question from Matt. He says, "Hi, Bob. I've been working on my own original webcomic strip for a few years. It has its own website, and I post new comics on that and my Instagram every week. Do you have any tips on how to start self-publishing books? What are some good websites to post to also to gain an audience?"
That's a tricky question, because I don't know how. I'm constantly trying to get my strip to get a bigger audience. I think you're doing everything you need to do is get it out there. Instagram's a great place. I'm syndicated on Go Comics, and I actually get more readers and likes on Instagram than Go Comics, and I think it's because so many more people are on Instagram and they stumble upon things, whereas you've got to be a comic fan to Go Comics, which they have Peanuts and reruns of Calvin and Hobbes and newer strips, and they have a ton of content, but you have to be a fan of comics to go there. So you're not going to reach as wide an audience, but Instagram I think is great. Facebook is probably a great place to post your strip. But the secret to getting more readers, I don't know. I just keep doing it. I've seen strips that just have so many readers. I don't know how they do it. Some people are really savvy with the internet and know how to gain more readers, or they just have a style or a modern take on things that my strip doesn't offer, that clicks with an audience, and they have a lot more readers, which I understand. So but self-publishing is pretty easy to do now. There's plenty of places you can self-publish. I know Amazon, you can self-publish. There's all kinds of websites where you can self-publish. I would encourage anybody, if they've got a backlog of strips that they want to put into a book, definitely put it out there. Yeah,
you got to get it into a forum or a presentable place where people can find it, right? Nobody's going to find it stuck in your drawer.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a tricky thing too, because I've gone through periods where you're just like, why am I doing this? I don't have as many readers as I would like, but then you got to think, well, I just like doing it. And if people find it and discover it, that's great. If they don't, I'm still going to do it anyways. And just keep chipping away, and slowly you do gain more readers and popularity. But it's hard. The web has so many opportunities, but then it's also so much is out there that it's hard to get discovered as well.
Yeah, there's a lot you have to wade through, but I think the qualitative
Yeah,
materials do rise, and
yeah,
they sustain. They'll
yeah,
they'll stay longer. I think a lot of great forums, again, getting to festivals, getting to
yeah,
events, getting to check to places like CTN and
yes,
other festivals where comics are focused on. You'll find your audience, and word of mouth is a big part of getting that spread too.
right,
So,
yeah,
but yeah, that's another challenge. Is as creatives, you were so focused on
yeah,
creating, but then, which is the joy.
yeah,
But there is also a wonderful plus when people get to see and experience and
yeah.
join in on your humor, your world, and play within your sandbox. So
Yeah, I just started 6 months ago on Instagram, and so many people think the strip is brand new, and I've been drawing it for years, and it's been on Go Comics for 10 years, and they've never seen it. So there's a whole new audience now that
absolutely.
I didn't know was out there, but they just, depending on what websites they stumble upon or go to, um, they're not going to know your stuff.
Well, and
And,
I think going back historically in terms of comics, it was always through newspapers and getting something
yes,
syndicated or through comic books to, so
yeah,
you had very narrow paths
mhm,
to to explore. But to your point, the internet is such a great and vast and sometimes quagmired
yeah,
forum, but you can at least target and get your work out to those who are interested and looking for this kind of thing or who might enjoy it.
yeah,
Again, it's all
exactly.
about thinking beyond, outside of the box, as they say, to
Yeah,
try different, something new, something different, and you never know where you'll find your audience will find you.
definitely. Yeah, yeah, it's very
uh,
true.
Bob, just to kind of wrap it out, what is some of the best career advice you've been given, either for animation and or comics?
Uh, Boy, that's a tough one. I'm trying to. I don't know if I can narrow it down to
Or
one thing.
both?
Um, yeah. I mean, the one big career advice that stands out is the one I mentioned earlier, was draw what you know, and that was a huge thing. Once I realized and understood that, it took me years to understand that yeah, I have something unique, and I'm going to be able to come up with more ideas. And it's going to be more authentic if it comes from me and something that I know. So that, I think, is great advice. That one was huge. And then the other one is probably one we've all heard. Uh, just when you're first starting out, just draw all the time. Just draw, draw, draw. I mean, if you don't draw that much, then maybe it's not the career for you. The people that I see that really make it, they just draw all the time. I mean, that doesn't mean you've got to every second you're awake you're drawing, but there's a need for you can't not draw. Whether you worked in animation or not, you would be drawing something. It's something you have that in your genes. So I would just keep drawing, and that was something I was told, just draw all the time. Always draw. Yeah,
Was Walt Stanchfield always said you had how many thousands of bad drawings,
yeah,
and you get them out of the way, get them
yeah.
done, get them out of the way to get
Get
to the
them out of
good
the way.
ones.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's only going to happen, to your point about just draw, just do it, and
yeah.
get
And
past any kind of judgment.
there's people I've worked with that they seem to have not drawn a lot, and they're really good. And that's going to happen sometimes. There's some people that just figure things out quicker. But what I've learned about those people after years later thinking about it, they were always thinking about it. And maybe they weren't, they're really good at analyzing things and noticing things and observing things and studying things. And when they did start to draw, they kind of knew what they were going to draw before they drew it. So there's a little of that too, observing, looking and seeing. Charles Schultz said he would draw with his eyes. And what he meant by that was like, you're looking at a person, you're talking, he would imagine a line drawing, like drawing the person's face and kind of, there's something to that. You're kind of visualizing it.
Yeah. Precognitively
Yeah.
projecting it out there and going, yeah, that's how that'll look.
Yeah. It probably helps with memorizing how someone looks too, or something looks if you're really imagining it.
Taking those mental notes. Well, so many great and inspirational thoughts here, Bob. Thank you so much for spending
I hope
time
so.
and for casting a light into the parallel lines that you explore on a regular basis with your artistry. We are grateful for it.
Well, I appreciate everybody who came to watch this, and I hope there's something I was able to.
I think, that's the great joy of these conversations, is that everybody, it's a deep well to dip into. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing your incredible worlds with us today. You've been an inspiration for many artists who have been trying to figure out where their place may be in this world, and showing them that you've got multiple options ahead. So that's the joy.
Yeah, so many options. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob. And again, be sure to find more details about Bob and what we've discussed today at CTN. And again, Bob, thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Amazing
I
light.
really appreciate it.
Great
Thank
pleasure.
you so much.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye.